personally, I think it could be better. I think this is a bit of a complicated one. I do think that there have been, and we have touched on this in our discussion. Like there are some accessibility features that have been, made more widely available, like wheelchair ramps, just larger fonts on things, etc. But yeah, I want to pose the question to the group. Do you guys think the world accommodates for people with disabilities? Who would like to start?
Well, from my own experience, I don't think there's enough. And I think we can do a lot more. But then a lot more means what specifically? Without causing a little bit of an uproar in terms of that. But I think we can definitely do a lot more, not only within ourselves in our household, but from as a fellow person to a company. And I think that needs to start somewhere, and what that somewhere is and what that looks like definitely needs to speak to a bit more.
Just while the mic is being passed around, I do think that where this comes from is very important. Personally, I think the government should do it. I think it's their responsibility to take care of their citizens, both fully able-bodied and none. But let me not get too radical here. But yeah, I completely agree. I do think that there is more work that needs to be done. For sure. And, as we expand on the range of disabilities, the levels of accessibilities need to also expand as well. Like it is well and good having a disabled parking, but I mean, is there I actually don't have an example off the top of my head, but disabled parking is a great way to start.
And then have to walk up a flight of stairs.
Yeah, 100%. Disabled parking leading to the Washington steps or whatever they're called. That doesn't make sense, and I think that can be greatly improved. And like you say, it starts at a personal level, then a company level, then a social level, and we just constantly increase, and that is how we make the world a better place.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily going to touch on anything that the world has done to accommodate people with disabilities per se, but I think it's in my very few years on Earth, I can see the world changing. I can see the world becoming more welcoming. Obviously, there's lots going on in the world right now, but disabilities are a lot more socially accepted these days. People acknowledge that there are people living in the world with disabilities, whereas perhaps in the past it was almost a us versus them sort of attitude towards it, where I think now people are more accepting of race, of religion, and also of people with disabilities and the idea of people with disabilities.
Yeah, very well said. Does anyone else have thoughts this side?
So I would actually just like to add what Josh said, and this is just from a YouTube short I saw recently as well. No, the one nice thing about also helping people with disabilities is it doesn't only help them, it also helps normal people. And the only example I can think of now is, for example, just a ramp. Like if you had to go to a shop and there was only a staircase, but what if you're a mother with a pram? Pram, right word? Yeah? Stroller, yeah. No, but like that's an example of like they built the ramp for people with wheelchairs, but it also helps the average normal people. Back to the previous discussion. So yeah, just wanted to mention that point.
I think we probably also underestimate in a lot of our lives, potentially a lot of our friends and family that have some sort of disability that we probably forget on a day-to-day basis. A good friend of mine has quite a severe hearing disability in his left ear. And you always have to remember when we go to a bar or a club or a busy restaurant, especially with live music, oftentimes the table is closest to the live music and it's very, very loud. And we've been in instances where it's like, he and myself and others don't want to sit there because of the fact that he then won't be able to interact with the table, and other friends or guests or the restaurant don't think about it. They don't say, okay, hang on, let's the 10 of us move elsewhere so that we can accommodate that person. And so you do have to constantly think, no, it's like there's other reasons that we might not want to be at that table in that instance, and think about that, because otherwise the person literally cannot hear what we're saying for 2 hours of the night.
Yeah, no, that is a great point. And I had a conversation not so long ago, kind of around this topic, where the idea came up is whose responsibility is it to install that ramp, right? Should the person who is disabled have to pay for it? But no, because every person who does not need the ramp doesn't have to pay extra to get into that facility. It is one of those things where, again, you don't really think about it if you don't need it, but these kinds of things need to be brought up so that we can just live in a more inclusive and accessible world to all.
100%. So I have two things to contribute towards the world accommodating differently abled people, right? I think the first one is, in order to know how to accommodate them, we need to be educated about the needs, right? So if we don't get to learn or inform ourselves on what are the needs, and it goes back to the first point where we said not all of them are obvious. So we're speaking a lot about the ramp, the wheelchair, the lift, disabled parking. Those are obvious. But what about the things that are not obvious, right? Like your friend, where you can easily just forget that. So I think we need to educate ourselves enough to be cognizant of all the different disabilities that do exist that could affect people around us, which we might actually not even be aware of at times. That's the first thing. And then the second thing, when we say the world accommodating, this goes beyond South Africa, right? And I'd like to highlight on behalf of the world, right, that when we look at there's something called the 2030 Agenda, right, the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and there is a goal there that speaks to this, right? So this is basically the world's mandate of trying to draft something that speaks to this, which should filter down to all the countries and all the provinces and so forth. So Goal 10 speaks to striving to reduce inequality by promoting inclusion of all, including people with disabilities. So, that's the bigger picture. But, we could be proud of the fact that they do have it there as part of the goals, right? But I think it then becomes our responsibility to filter it down into our country, South Africa. And within South Africa, into the different spaces, workspaces, social spaces, various opportunity spaces that really can accommodate people with disabilities. So, it's a good question, but it's very broad as well. And I think we could break it down by each person in this room basically taking the initiative to educate themselves, because that's the only way we can know. And we could sort of be on alert, that there's more that goes beyond just seeing the individual. There could be more to it. So, but people with disabilities that aren't visible won't often just be obvious. So it takes us sort of creating comfortable environments with each other, where we are able to get to know each other on that level that, I had an accident, so I have a temporary disability, for example. So, and then you can then accommodate it that way. But I think from that global perspective, when we speak about the world itself, they've included it as part of the plan. And 2030 is what now, almost 5 years away, So if we had to look at the stats of how that is, the traction of that, maybe that speaks to how now, like your initiative, distributing more people into corporate, things changing bit by bit as we are witnessing, so something is happening, but obviously it will take time. But it's good to know that within those goals of no poverty, enough resources, enough healthcare, there is also reducing inequality when it comes to disability. So it's not something that's not part of the plan or the list. Our South African government could do better itself, but they have a mandate from a global context as well. So I guess we we could be hopeful that we're getting somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was very well put, and you're absolutely right on the idea that we need to educate ourselves 100%. I don't think, obviously, having some sort of disability or living with some sort of disability gives you a certain level of insight, but that does not mean you automatically know these kinds of things. I didn't know about that, for example. I've had this my whole life, and that is this is the first time I'm hearing that, and that is fantastic. Just to be clear. So yeah, I do think it is, like you say, every individual's responsibility to educate themselves, and through that, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, we come back to empathy. It is the empathy that we need to develop for those around us, for those who have these struggles, and yeah, there's certain ways that we can assist them.
Oh yeah, Libby, just want to add on a couple of stats to yours. That was wonderfully said, by the way. But in South Africa, 64 million people, and 3 million people identified as having disabilities in South Africa alone. And so we can break that down into a local and then international aspect. And for anyone who's gone out and traveled and had a look at the differences between accommodation, South Africa, we have a lot to learn. And I think I could mention a country, Japan. I'll focus on Japan. The accommodations are phenomenal. It's incredible. And I think the world has a lot to learn from them if we focus on the question itself. But yeah, it passes on.
I think it's also important to ask and peg the question at what do our disability individuals need? It's one thing saying we could do this, we could do it, but what is that? And I think even if we look at statistics and we take into account what we've done so far, the most people in general, if you do not make a hoo-ha about something, no one's going to know. And I'm not saying that the onus lies only just on individuals who have an impairment or a disability. The onus lies on us as well. We need to be cognizant of that fact, but we need to be cognizant to understand what it is that those individuals need. It's equally important. It's a two-way communication. I would see it as a conversation, and I think we as individuals need to stand with those individuals who have disabilities and say, this is what we need. May it be in our schools, may it be when they are in primary school, in high school, in university. That is when we need to start, because that foundation phase is so important. It's not just about the now. It's about when they getting into that. They're still trying to sort of understand what their disability means to them. So we need to start from that foundation and work our way up. And we need to be really subtle in the approach, but also aggressive in saying that this is what our disability individuals need.
Sorry, I was not going to really speak, but I want to challenge that a bit, right? In that, I found that there's a bit of a gap when you try have a conversation with someone that's differently abled, in that there's this sort of fear, where you're very aware to not offend, right? Or to be invasive, or to sort of make them feel like you are saying that they're differently abled. So how do we make them comfortable to be able to communicate their needs?
Look, firstly, they're people. And I don't think that they should be treated. We were talking about empathy and respect. And I don't think anyone wants to be disrespected. But I think everyone needs to be able to understand. So the best thing that I would think is that I'm not going to know if I don't ask. That's my opinion. It may be completely different to the rest of the panel over here, but I think if I need to understand what Ayabonga needs, I'm certainly going to ask Ayabonga what he needs, and then correct me in terms of how am I asking it? Is it coming across to, am I offending you? Is it the wrong approach? Help me help you to get what you need at the end of the day. And I think that is what I'm trying to say. We can say the world needs more and we need to do more, but yes, we do. The reality is that we do. But I also need to understand, what do you need? I'm not going to know what Ayabonga needs if I don't ask and he doesn't speak up.
I think that is a great point, and that's a great way to put that. You do need to have those conversations, and sometimes they can be slightly awkward. There are times when you can say something that isn't maybe as delicate as it could have been, but then I do think it is up to the two people having that conversation. The one asking the question needs to be coming through with genuine curiosity and consideration, and the other person also needs to give a little bit of leeway to understand that the person doesn't see things the same way as you, and then just gently correct some of their verbiage. If they use the wrong word, gently point it out. Say, maybe don't say disabled people, say persons with disabilities, just these gentle things. And then I think it is perfectly permissible to say the wrong thing and then take that and learn from it and say, okay, that wasn't right, I am now going to go forward, I now know the right way to have this conversation, let's have the conversation.
And I also think that to what Lizanne was saying about asking a person with disability if whether what it is that they need and what it is that can work for them in a certain situation. I think it also ties back to what I just said earlier about marketing and about having things available and shown out there into the world what is available for a disabled person. And also I think that in most cases some of the companies or some of the organizations, restaurants out there, they don't want to put in more money, because when you want to accommodate a person, you're going to have to spend more money on infrastructure, like accommodating, like building the buildings and everything to ensure that it's going to accommodate different people of different kinds of disabilities. So in this case, it makes the companies do not want to spend money. That's why I think like there are some more organizations out there who don't want to hire people with disabilities because they don't want to expand their offices to be able to suit people with going with wheelchairs into work and everything. And I also think that when you there are fewer people with disabilities, like in most cases, the people have that mindset that there are not much people with disabilities. Since there are not much people with disabilities, why should we go through the pressure of having to do something that there's no person who's going to take part in this? I think it also ties back to that.
One thing I just want to add to that, and it's a good perspective to add, like you mentioned, like why would a company want to build a building that fits for disabled people, for example? And my one thing I want to add to that is just always, you might be fine now. You could be in a car accident. Anything could happen to you. You could go blind. You could lose your hearing. You could lose your legs. Like, it can be used. So I almost want to come back to like treat it like you would have been wanted to treat it, be treated. So that's why I want to add to that. Like, corporations should treat it not as like preparing a building for disabled people, more like making it accommodating everybody. And that's kind of what I just wanted to add.
Yeah, very much so. I do think we're running low on time, so let's closing thoughts.
No, I was just going to say as well, is I think it's a very good conversation and to try and understand when should a corporation or government or other make these accommodations. In my opinion, the more and better and sooner Lusaka can do so and should strive to be better at, the better. And if we are able to then hire and bring on both disabled and non-disabled, the best people, regardless of their ability, that's a better competitive advantage that we should use against our competitors. If we're willing to hire the best people regardless of an ability and they aren't, I think we've done a good job then.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And to a point that was brought up earlier, it should come from the outside. I'm firmly of the opinion that not just blind people should advocate for the blind, not just deaf people should advocate for people without hearing. It does need to come from everyone, because that is, even if it doesn't affect you, like you said, it could. And even if it doesn't affect you, it's affecting someone else, which means you should care. There is an incredible saying that I really, really like. That's society will only prosper when old men plant trees they will never sit in the shade of. You need to make the world better, not just for yourself, but for the next generation. And, everyone who is going to, pick fruit from that tree one day.